was speaking with Prem Prayojan Prabhu, we were saying, come to Boston. There's a lot of people, very sincere people in this area, very intelligent people who are really wanting to learn more about the depths and the inner teachings of yoga and bhakti, and I think that people in this part of the world will really appreciate what you have to share. So for one reason or another, every year something happened. It was a maybe. And this year we were in India, in one of the most sacred places in all of India, in Mayapur, the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And all of a sudden, we were in two different groups, and all of a sudden we converged under this tree where Mahaprabhu was born, which is like a desire tree. So anything that happens under that tree, any desire that's made under that tree will manifest. And we came together and we gave each other a huge hug, and then we said, "You're coming to Boston." He said, "Yes, I'm coming to Boston." So at that moment we knew for sure that would happen. So we're all very fortunate tonight to have Prem Prayojan here, somebody who has been practicing the path of Bhakti Yoga for many, many years and has had the beautiful, wonderful fortune of studying with a few of the most powerful, divine personalities that we know of on the planet. And he'll perhaps touch on the importance of having association like that in life. And so we're very fortunate to have Prabhu here, and take it over. Thank you so much.
Hari Bol.
So we'd like to begin by purifying the atmosphere, withdrawing our consciousness from all external things and becoming completely absorbed in the divine vibration of the Maha Mantra. So the repetition of mantra is called japa, and it may be done internally silently, in which case it's part of the anga of bhakti, the practice of bhakti called smaran, or meditation. And if it's recited outwardly for everyone to hear, then japa is in the category of kirtan, actually. So the definition of japa, how to recite a mantra, is given in Sri Hari Bhakti Vilas. Mano madhye stito mantro, mantro madhye stitam manaha, mano mantram samayuktam etadhi japalakshanam. It means one should place the mantra inside the mind exclusively. Nothing else should be there, only the mantra. And once you've placed the mantra within your mind, then you should place your mind inside the mantra. So with 3D objects, that doesn't work. You can't put one box inside another box and then put the outer box inside the inner. That doesn't work. So, but with the mind and with the sound vibration, we can put the mantra in the mind and the mind in the mantra. Each time we repeat it. And so, mano mantram samayuktam. The mind and the mantra become samayukta. That means completely fused together with each other. That there is no identity or experience outside of the vibration of the mantra. And that is the symptom of japa. Now we're actually doing japa, or in this case kirtan, repetition of mantra. So it's a total absorption. And coming into that state of absorption, one should simply be patient and wait for the internal experience to unfold of its own accord. So that's the journey for each one of you. Namaha. Krishna Vardam Trisha Krishna Sangopangastra Parshada Yagai Sankirtana Prayai Yajanti Sumedasaha. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna
Only God knew that.
Some light now.
Everyone comfortable? Air comfortable? Sweating now a little. Nobody's cold anymore.
Yes, get comfortable. If you prefer to take a chair, you can do that. But all the great yogis and yoginis here can sit in an asana without moving and without feeling the slightest discomfort for 1,000 years. Namo Shrista Manamapi Pashati Putam Atra Surupam Rupam Tasya Brajamuri Purim Maturim Gosvatim Radha Kundam Giribaram Ahoradikam Hadvasam Rakto Yasya Pradita Kripaya Sri Guru Tam Natosmi Gurave Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namah Ananda Lila Maya Vigrahaya Hema Bhadivyatschavi Sundaraya Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Sham Sundar Shikandashik Smrahas Murali Manohara Radhikarasika Mama Kripanidhe Priya Chanakim Karim Kuru Tavaivasmi, Tavaivasmi Nadivamiktaya Vina Iti Vikyaya Devi Tam Namaham Chanantikam. First of all, I offer my heart like so many flower petals, thousands and thousands of times, as an offering at the feet of my holy master, my supremely worshipable spiritual guru, Asmadeva Paramaradhatam Guru Pada Padma, and Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pada Shtotara Satashishimat Rupanugacharya Sila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. Secondly, I bow down with great honor at the feet of my Guru's Guru, and to his Guru, and to his Guru, and his Guru, and all the great saints in the unbroken line of teachers going back thousands and thousands of years to Sri Krishna himself. The channel through which the current of the eternal, immortal nectar of Bhakti Yoga descends to this world right now on this very day. So I offer my pranam to them. And finally, I offer my pranam to all of you, my very dear brothers and sisters. the Vedas say, Raso Vayasaha Sa Evayam Labdanandi Bhavati. The ultimate reality, the supreme truth, is rasa. Rasa means taste, flavor of love. So God is love. God is the embodiment of love. He is the object of everyone's love. And He has love for everyone. And by nature, that Supreme Being is the relisher of unlimited, variegated flavors of ecstatic emotion. You know, ice cream is not one flavor. There are so many flavors. So transcendental love also has so many different flavors. To taste that divine love, to realize that divine love, that's the goal of our life. But sometimes we feel internal resistance to that. Because we are conditioned by this temporary material plane. Through our being immersed in that transcendental love, there is a thing called philosophy. Hearing which we develop conviction, and our doubts in that realm, our doubts in the process to attain that realm, the doubts which hold us back from investing our full energy into realizing that realm, they're all removed. So this evening we want to discuss some elements of the Vedic philosophy, and I was requested this evening to speak about the relationship between the classical yoga system of Patanjali, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and the Bhakti school, the devotional school, as presented in, of course, the Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta in Bhagavad Purana and other Vedic literatures. So that's my field of practice and study, the Bhakti tradition. But within the Bhakti tradition of Bhakti Vedanta, there is also a study of the Yoga Sutras. Because Yoga Sutras constitutes one of the 6 classical systems of Vedic philosophy, which are essentially 6 different ways of looking at the world. And so a student of Vedanta, that means the conclusion of the Vedas, Bhakti, they don't go directly there, but they examine very carefully different perspectives, different ways of looking at the world. Just like when you do yoga, before you do a very demanding asana, you'll do some more preliminary stretches. So, the mature mind, it cannot accommodate the vast conception of transcendence. So, through the study of the various points of view, we become more intellectually flexible. To try on the shoes of different, of course they didn't wear shoes, but you understand the analogy, of different saints. And in Vedanta there's a comparison, contrasting and comparing different points of view to identify their strengths and their weaknesses. The weaknesses are discarded and the strengths are synthesized, and what you're left with is Vedanta, the conclusion. And that's Bhakti, love, devotion. So the study of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali plays a role, a part, in traditionally the Vedanta tradition of Bhakti Yoga. But also, these sutras are quite dear to me on my own personal journey. Because when I was 11 years old, I went to shopping with my father, and we went in a bookshop, and when we came out, he said, "Oh, I've got a present for you." And he gave me a huge edition of the Yoga Sutras with a very extensive commentary when I was 11 years old. So, whatever, 37 years ago. So I've studied the Yoga Sutras for 37 years. Later, when I was 15, I began to study Bhagavad Gita. And when I left college, then I moved to India. So I spent 22 years in India. And but the Yoga Sutras has a place in my heart because it's something that I first came in contact with in my formative years. And that gave me a great fascination for understanding the potential of consciousness. Because we see that in modern day psychology, it mainly deals with neuroses and pathologies and things like that, kind of fixing things that went wrong to come to some arbitrary, utopian, theoretical state of being normal. I never met that person yet. So, but the psychology of the Yoga Sutras doesn't deal with the negative aspect. Of course, it deals with how to become the negative aspect, but it looks at the excellent states of consciousness that are the potential of everyone. Everyone can have very astonishing and wonderful experience. Everyone can expand their consciousness and their awareness to most wonderful states, culminating in praying, love of God. When I took a Diksha initiation from my spiritual master, very kindly, he gave me the name Prem Prayojan. The word Prayojan means the goal of life. Prem Prayojan means love is the goal of life. So very kindly, my spiritual master gave me that name so I don't forget. Can't forget what is the goal of life. So, this evening, let me just give a disclaimer and apologize beforehand. It's going to be a little bit demanding. Right? So just, you're all back at college now, and you're going to do some hard studies. So please give me your full attention. And I want to give you some tools which will be so helpful, be very helpful. I want to give you a key, some keys that you'll be able to apply in so many different situations, and many things about consciousness, about your yoga practice, about Vedic knowledge that you may be familiar with now, but are somewhat vague. With these keys, everything will become crystal clear. So, without further ado. Now, oh, yes. You're probably aware that the yoga system of Patanjali has a foundational metaphysics called Sankhya. Sankhya. Sam means completely, and Kya means to count. So Sankhya means a complete categorization, a comprehensive taxonomy of all the categories of existence. So we can see the components of everything, how they fit together and how they function, and come together to make this thing called life. So that Sankhya philosophy, which is the foundation of the yoga system, is common to most of the principles are there in the bhakti tradition, in the Vedanta tradition as well. So it will help you understand many things. So essentially, the idea is this. Begin at the top here. Prakriti. Prakriti means nature. I mean, literally, pra means prakrista, excellent, and kriti means accomplished. In other words, that which excellently accomplishes everything. That energy whose activities are wonderful and astonishing. So I'm sure you'll agree when you look at the universe, it's all quite astonishing. Right? So Prakriti is the original, unmanifest potential energy from which the universe comes. So in Prakriti, there are three primordial energies called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Right? Just raise your hand if you're familiar with those three terms, so I do not have to explain. So you all know. Okay. So we have Sattva, the mode of goodness, Rajas, passion, and Tamas. So Rajas is the creative impetus that brings everything into existence. Sattva maintains it for some time, and then Tamas comes and causes dissolution. So these are essentially the potencies within Prakriti for creation, maintenance, and destruction. So everything we see around us goes through those phases. Now, before the manifestation of the universe, before the Big Bang, if you like, Prakriti, these three energies are in equilibrium. That means they're perfectly balanced with each other, so there's no activity. Then, the equilibrium of Prakriti is broken by Kal Purush. Prakriti is considered to be female in nature, and that material energy is also known as a goddess, Durga. Durga or Ma. And the male counterpart of the female energy is Shiva. So Shiva is the Kal Purush. So when the male principle of time unites with the female principle of Prakriti, right, then there is the birth of the world. Like that. So perhaps you've seen Lord Shiva is worshipped in the form of the Shivling. So the Shivling is essentially the male genital and the female yoni uniting. That's Prakriti and Purush, or Shiva and Shakti, Shiva and Durga, from which that's the mother and father of the material world. So now when the equilibrium of Prakriti is broken, then the first element that manifests is called Mahat. Mahat, or Mahat Tattva. And the Mahat is a very fine, very subtle, luminous, illuminating, non-differentiated substance. Now, when this Mahat, gradually the waves, the equilibrium is broken, so there are waves, there are pulses of prominence of one of the gunas or the other. So when the Mahat becomes touched by Tamas, another element appears from that. And that is called Ahankar. Ahankar. That is the element of ego. Now, just to give an illustration here, if you have milk and it's touched by a curdling agent like tamarind or lemon juice or yogurt, then what happens is the milk will all transform. Then if you churn that yogurt, it will transform again and become butter. Then if you heat that butter, it transforms again and becomes ghee. Now, from beginning to end, it's all the same thing, but it's evolving through different stages, and each stage has its own characteristics. Like milk will heat you, and yogurt will cool you down, and ghee will be a carrier for herbal medicine to reach the parts of your body it needs to reach in Ayurvedic medicine, and so on. So, even though we have one substance here, Prakriti, as it evolves, the evolutes of Prakriti have their own specific characteristics. So we have Prakriti, Mahat, Ahankar, ego, and then the portion of ego which is predominated more by sattva makes an element called manas. So English is an Indo-European language, meaning that Sanskrit is the mother language. So our word mind, mental, and so it comes from the Sanskrit manas, the element of mind. So that's a sattvic transformation of ahankar. When ahankar transforms again, but predominantly rajas, it produces buddhi, the element of intelligence. So, those of you who study the Yoga Sutras, you'll know that the buddhi has its various vrittis, such as praman, that is the valid cognition, you recognize something. Viparya, invalid cognition. You have an experience, but it's actually invalid. For example, right now, you may be feeling that you're this physical body. But we're not this physical body at all. Right? We're spiritual beings, but we very much identify with it. So that's an example of invalid cognition, viparya. And then you have smriti, memory, and vikalpa, imagination, and nidra, sleep. So all these internal states that we experience, imagination, memory, sleep, valid cognition, invalid cognitions, they're all functions of the element of buddhi. And when the ahankar transforms, being predominated by tamas, trying to line everything up here so it makes sense, right? Yeah. So then it produces the first of the gross elements, and that is called shabda. Shabda means sound. Sound. This buddhi also transforms and becomes, let me see, I'll write it in English so you don't have to memorize so many Sanskrit terms. Becomes the senses. So our senses, the power to see, hear, taste and smell, this is the actual rajasic transformation of ahankar. And these senses can detect the transformations, the tamasic transformations of ahankar, because from sound comes the 5 elements. I'll write them in English. Okay, so there you are. The tamasic transformation of ahankar brings about sound, and from sound evolves the element of akash, space. And then space transforms and becomes the element of air, and then fire, water, and then the grossest of all the elements, earth. And so these, each one of the senses is connected to one of the elements. For example, the sense of hearing detects sound in space. Right? If you close your eyes and you hear a sound, you know which direction it came from. So our spatial orientation is revealed by sound. And then air is detected by touch. When the air moves, you feel it on the surface of your skin. And then fire has form. That's the first element that has form, and it's detected by the eye. Water is a product of the element of taste, which is detected by the tongue. And the quality of earth is fragrance. So each one, for example, earth includes all the other. So something which is made of earth, like a stone, It includes that you can lick it and see what it tastes like, you can touch it, you can see it, you can smell it, and it occupies some space like that. So all of the elements, the lower elements, contain the qualities of the previous ones. So this is a basic chart. I just have to add one or two more details. The sense object by which the gross elements are detected are the subtle causes of the gross elements. So the sense detects sound, and that indicates spatial orientation. Air, this element, touch. In Sanskrit that's called sparsha. Sparsha. And then air is form. In Sanskrit, roop. And then that leads to fire. And water is shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, taste. And then fragrance. Fragrance, that's called gandha in Sanskrit. Okay. So let's see, we can put on the senses here. Hearing is connected to sound, and the skin, the tactile sense, to touch, the sight, to form, the tongue, to taste, and the nose, the olfactory sense, to fragrance. Okay, so there we have what is known as the evolutes of Prakriti, how from the total unmanifest Prakriti or material energy, by the touch of the time factor, the Kal Shakti, the equilibrium is broken, and then they develop these evolutes. And all these elements are combined together, mixed together by the interaction of the three gunas. Just like if you're making a soup. So you get some vegetables and some water and some salt and spices and everything, and you mix it all together and you get the soup. So all these elements are mixed together by the interaction of the three gunas, and you get this soup called life. Right? So in the yoga system, in Vedanta, this is the basic key for understanding everything that's going on here. Now, ourselves, who we are none of this. And essentially, ignorance, the opposite of knowledge, the antithesis of knowledge, is to make the mistake of thinking that I am a part of this. You see? So, for example, all these elements exist in the universe, but they also exist within our body. So our body is like a microcosm of the macrocosm, right? So in our body we have earth, we have water, we have some fire of digestion, and so on. And we have the element of mind. Our mind is that which is that aspect of our psychological body which engages in accepting things and rejecting things, our likes and dislikes, and so on. Then we have intelligence, our power of discrimination, and our functions of memory and imagination, and so on. And then we have ego, which localizes our consciousness and makes us see the world from one particular perspective, one particular point of view. It makes us see the world just from the vantage point of one body. So that's very limiting for us. Someone who's liberated from the bodily conception of life, they don't see the world from the vantage point of their limited body, and they don't see others in that way either. They give up a sense of proprietorship even over the body in which they've taken birth. They think, oh, Everything belongs to God. This body belongs to God. My soul belongs to God. Right? So it said that a person will have to take birth again. In other words, if you have ego, you have to take birth again. The soul has to take another body, as long as the ego is persisting. So what is the sign that the ego is there or not there? So an example is given in the Bhagavad Purana that as long as you make a discrimination between your own stomach and the stomach of another being, you have to take birth again. You see? And this is why, let's say, if you come to a holy festival, or you live in an ashram or a monastery in India, then what happens is, if there's a special day, usually you fast, right? And then at the end of the day or the next day, then there's a feast. So you've been fasting for a long time, and then all the guests come, and so then the residents of the monastery, they have to feed everyone else before they eat themselves. And so then you get this internal measurement or experience of how far you've progressed, to what degree you've overcome the ego when you're starving and you have to feed all these hundreds of people food, but you can't take any yourself. And then you'll see, are you still identifying with your belly? Are you making a difference between yourself and others? And that discrimination of trying to put ourselves before another person is in Sanskrit called dvesh, or envy. And the first principle in the Yoga Sutras is ahimsa. The general meaning of ahimsa is non-violence, but what it really means is to be completely free from envy. To not put yourself above others and before others. And prioritize yourself before others. And it said that all the other yams and niyams are actually just developments or different aspects or components of that ahimsa. Right? So a very central feature of all the yoga systems is overcoming the ego, the influence of this element of ahankara. Now, we were just discussing how this body is a microcosm of the macrocosm of the universe, right? So we can see how the senses are in this body, the mind, the intelligence, the ego, but what about Mahat? So Mahat is the last, finest component of your psychological body. And when this element is in the universe, it's called Mahat. But when that element is in your body, then it's called, and you may have heard of this term before, Chitta. Chitta. And so in the yoga school and in the Vedanta school, because all the components of the psychological body are transformations of chitta, then chitta is used as an overall term for the whole psychological organ. Right? So, but chitta on itself, before it becomes contaminated and transforms into ego, is very, very fine. And so what a yoga system means to stop the vrittis, the oscillations of the chitta, so that these elements dissolve back into their causes and you're just left with chitta. And chitta, you can see your soul. Your soul is reflected. Just like if a mirror is covered in dust, then if you look, you just see the dust, you don't see yourself. So when the chitta is transformed into ego, mind and intelligence, the soul can't see himself. We don't know who we are. We identify with everything from here down. Right? And so yoga system, of course, the sutras begin Atha Yoga Anushashanam. Now there will be an explanation of the system of yoga. And then the first sutra we have, which is most important, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga means the restraint of the oscillations of the chitta. Why? Because the oscillations of chitta have made all of this, all these material coverings of the soul. So if we can, by some yogic means, it may be karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, or bhakti yoga, if we can slow down the oscillations within the chitta which have produced all of this, they will dissolve into they will resolve themselves into their causes, and we'll be left with just the pure element of chitta, and we'll be able to then see who we are. So Patanjali describes that if the chitta is steady, then swarupavasthana, you are situated in your own true spiritual nature. But if not, then itaratra vritti swarupyam, which means if your chitta, your psychological organ, is in a state of turbulence, if there's oscillation there, then you'll identify with all the very nature of those oscillations is it produces all of these elements. You see? So that in a nutshell is the project of yoga. Yoga, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says the same thing. Samatvam yoga uchate. Yoga means how to attain the state of equilibrium of the psychological organ, so we can get a clear picture of who we are. It's just like if you look at in the surface of a lake. If the lake is still, you can see a reflection in it. But if the surface of the water is disturbed, then you kind of see yourself, but it's all, all distorted. So, as long as our chitta, our psychological organ, the psychological body is in a state of fluctuation, as long as it's oscillating, our entire perception of reality is completely distorted. Completely distorted. And the fundamental distortion is dehatma buddhi, identification with a physical body. And so we think that we're male or female or young or old or black or white or whatever. We can have so many designations. They're growing day by day. How many genders do we have now? Like 20. So this body identification is a product of a disturbed mind, essentially. So if we can bring the mind to a state of peacefulness, we can discover our true spiritual nature. And the different types of yoga are meant to facilitate that. Okay? So, now, if you can really, everyone, please try to learn this chart, really have it in your mind, and so you know your way around, just like you know your way around the streets of Boston. Right? And then, when you're familiar with it, thoroughly familiar with it, now you can use this to understand everything in this world, basically. Everything that's going on in this world. And specifically, you will need this to understand what Patanjali is describing in the sutras, in the Yoga Sutras. So, now, who has studied a little bit, at least the Yoga Sutras? Okay? Little, okay. So, I'd like to move on to another topic. After some time, it's going to get really easy. It will be very relaxing, but I'm making you work in the beginning. Because, you know, according to Ayurveda, when you eat a meal, you take a meal, there are 6 different flavors of food. And you have to taste them in a particular order. And if you taste the flavors of the food in that particular order, that will be the best for your health and for your digestion. So the first flavor you have to taste is bitter. Bitter. That is the Karela, the bitter lemon, bitter melon. You eat that's called the sukta first. You eat the bitter things first. It increases your digestive power. So we're going to move on to the sweeter things later, but right now it's going to be a bit bitter, so just, I know it's late, just stay with me. There is a method in my madness, so just place your trust in me for a few moments, and we'll see where it's taking us. Okay, now, who's heard of the things called Yoga Siddhis? Right, Yoga Siddhis? Mystic powers. Well, what's that? Is it magic? Is it voodoo? Boogie-woogie? Is it, you know? Or is there some scientific foundation for it? How it works? So yes, there is. Of course, people become very attractive to mystic power. They think, oh, if I could become a mystic and, you know, I could produce ashes in the palm of my hand, I could get thousands of followers and like that. So people do become attracted to mystical powers like that. But in the bhakti tradition and in Patanjali's yoga tradition, they're just considered to be distractions. They distract you from the truth. In other words, when you do a yoga sadhana as you're advancing, these siddhis, these perfections, they come to you and they try to tempt you away from your goal. Because it's essentially offering you the temptation of power, of control, of prestige, and all the things that ambitious people want in this world. And so Patanjali says that when you're going deeply into your meditation, you're going through the stages of trance, and you begin to see the higher beings, the various demigods and devatas, and they come and they offer you these mystic powers, right? So then you could think, wow, I'm progressing, I've gone up to the next stage, you see all the gods are giving me powers and everything. So Patanjali says, don't even smile. There's a sutra that says, when you see the higher beings coming to bless you with powers, don't even acknowledge them, don't even smile like, hi. Right? Because that's going to keep you entangled in the ahankar, ego. Right? Because I have the powers and you don't. Right? So, we want to look at some of the metaphysics involved in the development of the powers, the siddhis, and then see how that relates to bhakti yoga. Okay? So, when we speak about oscillations of the mind, in the Yoga Sutras there's a spectrum from very tamasic and disturbed mind up to the fully peaceful mind. So do you remember what the stages are? Huh?
The paths?
No, the spectrum of oscillation of mind. So the very disturbed mind, the mind which is overwhelmed by tamas, that's called mudha. Mudha, it means, you know, when you're so tired and you just go into a deep sleep and you just lose everything. Mudha, a completely senseless state. And then after you've rested for some time, then what happens? You wake up and there's still some tamas there, and so that's when people then would feel like, I really need a cappuccino.
Shower.
A shower, right? Yes. That's what the sattvic people think. But the rajasic people think I need a coffee.
How about both?
That's a mixture of sattva and rajas. Okay. So the stage of the mind where it's not dull, but it's kind of energetic, but going here and there, not focused. That's called the stage of kshipta. Kshipta. Yeah, but I'll just write them here to help. You have the first stage, mudha, which is tamasic, and then kshipta literally means thrown here and there. You know, like attention deficit disorder. You know, when you go online and you've got like 20 tabs open at the same time. So that's kshipta.
Super normal.
Actually, these days it's normal. With the help of technology, human beings now have the attention span of a grasshopper. Just see how far we've advanced. Okay, so there's Shipta. Then, now, if a person has a daily sadhana and they're trying to be concentrated, and they come to a stage where they're mainly focused, but they're occasionally distracted, that stage is called vikshipta. Vikshipta. And that is the stage of occasionally distracted. Now, if a person practices their daily meditations, their prayers, and the mind becomes, you see, this is tamas, this is rajas, this is sattva with a touch of rajas, which is making the unsteadiness. So when the mind becomes almost completely sattvic, it can't be completely sattvic because they're never separated from each other, but predominantly sattvic, then the stage comes called ekagra. Eka means one, and agra means point, so it means one-pointed, focused, like a laser. You know, if you take a magnifying glass and the rays of the sun become focused on one point, they become very powerful. So in the same way, when your mind becomes ekagra, one-pointed, it becomes an extremely powerful, materially speaking, an extremely powerful instrument. So that's ekagra. And then the last stage, when all oscillation of the mind is completely checked, restrained, that is nirodha. So yogas, chitta, vritti, nirodha, the complete restraint of all fluctuations of the mind. Now, according to Patanjali, these two stages are called yoga, actually. These two, until we come to that stage, we're not actually doing yoga. These two, and there's a reason for that, and the reason is this, that as soon as you enter into the stage of ekagra, now you become independent from the forces of your, not fully, but by and large, you become independent or free from the forces of your own samskars. Samskars means impressions. We've all had many experiences in previous lives and this life, and the totality of those impressions, they're all stored in the chitta, in the subconscious mind, and they're dictating our activities. You see? The choices that we think that we're making choices in real time. We're thinking that we wake up and think, what will I do today? And we have a desire. So we feel as if we're independent. But everything is being dictated by the sanskars, the impressions in our chitta. You see? For example, if you have, if in a previous life you've had a relationship with a particular kind of person, maybe a person who was tall or fat or something like that, and you had a good experience, then in this life, when you meet someone who physically resembles a person with whom you've had a good experience in the past, you just click with that person because it awakens that sanskar from, it triggers the sanskar from your subconscious mind, it comes into the conscious mind, and then you say, I want this, I like this. And it works the other way around. If you've had a bad experience with something, then when you come into a situation that resembles that again, it triggers that impression in the subconscious mind, it comes to the conscious mind and says, I don't like this. So what we're calling, what we think is our independence, our free will, our likes and dislikes, and that. And the soul is asleep in complete ignorance and kind of undergoing the dream of identification with this flow of karma, you see. And as long as a person, their life is oscillating, and most people, their life is basically going up and down between, you know, they're asleep, they wake up, they run around, they try to concentrate the day before their exam, and then they go back to being distracted again. And so they're oscillating between these three. As long as you're oscillating between these three, then you're just in the flow of karma, and your destiny is already written by your past activities. Right? So yoga means to disengage with your written destiny of karma and become liberated from the material existence. So that breaking down of the control of your previous impressions won't take place until ekagrata comes. And by every day when you spend some time in that state of meditation, that state of ekagrata, what it does is it makes new impressions of stillness, of peace, of knowledge, of being situated not with an ego in the physical body, but with the pure ego of the soul. And those impressions begin to override your material impressions. And in this way you gradually become free from karma until you're ultimately liberated. You become a mukta purush, a liberated soul. So these are the 5 stages of the mind. These two are called yoga, and yoga in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is synonymous with samadhi or trance. And so that's why the first pada is called samadhi pada, because yoga means trance. And trance has 2 levels, ekagra and nirodha. So that's why they're both called yoga. Okay? Is everyone on board? Are we all together? No confusion? No? Can we turn the page and go to the next level now?
Yeah.
You see, it's very, very scientific, and it has to be built up in layers. Our education in this, it has to be built up in layers. Otherwise, there will be confusion. So if you learn this, if you study it and you learn it very carefully in the layers, you'll be able to enter, you'll be able to penetrate such wonderful mysteries of life, first theoretically, and then by your own direct experience in your practice as well. Okay, let me just check how we're doing for time, because we have to get all this. We have to do all. We have to get the 6 flavors in the meal, so it's digested nicely. And you end with the dessert.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is kirtan.
Yeah.
And then prasad.
Yeah. Okay, then what should we do next? It's all so wonderful. I don't know which direction to go. Then these subjects are connected. Okay, I'm going to discuss now. Of course, these two, they're 2 types of trance. But the first type is called sampragyata samadhi, and the second type is called asampragyata samadhi. The difference is that in sampragyata samadhi, there's an experience of subject and object. You're the subject and there's an object that you're experiencing. But in the last stage, nirodha, that is kaivalya, there's no distinction between subject and object. That's an optional stage. Because sometimes when the yogis come to this stage, then they go into bhakti yoga in order to maintain their individual spiritual existence in a state beyond liberation, actually. We'll come to that later. But what I want to look at tonight, because it's extremely interesting, is the 4 stages of sampragyata samadhi. So we speak about samadhi trance, but there are actually 4 stages of asampragyata samadhi, and then 1 stage of nirodha. Asampragyata samadhi, sorry. 4 stages of sampragyata samadhi. So let's have a look at them and discover what they really mean. Perhaps some of you have studied the Yoga Sutras. Are you a little bit familiar with the stages of samadhi? You have savitarka, nirvitarka, savichara, nirvichara, sananda, and sasmita. No? No one got that far? Okay, we're going into the deep waters now. So far we've been paddling in the kiddies pool. Right? So now we're going to the Olympic pool. And up to the high dive. Don't worry. Don't panic. Don't have a panic attack, it's okay. Okay, so we're going into new ground now. Okay. Let's just write them down and then we'll explain them. But what I want to say is that if you read the sutras, you can see what these stages, different types of samadhi are. But unless you have this background, this key, you'll really not be able to grasp the subtle differences. It will be very vague and very confusing. That's why I mentioned before that this map is the key to understanding the different stages of trance or samadhi in the Yoga Sutras. Okay, so let's have a look. Our headline is let's try this one. Sampragyata samadhi. Sampragyata samadhi, it's all it means is a trance in which there's the experience of subject and object. So it's not complicated. Now, there are 4 levels, and the first 2 also divided into a couple of stages. So we have 1, sa vitarka, and then Nirvitarka. And then the second category is Savichar and Nirvichar. And then third one, Sananda. And last one, Sasmita. Okay, now, what does it mean? Ekagara. You've become free from tiredness, lethargy, the inertia of the mind. Your mind is enlivened. It's focused. Tamaguna has gone away, Rajaguna has gone away. You're very sattvic, very steady mind and feeling peaceful. And now your mind is focused, it's like a laser. Now you can choose where you want to focus that laser of your consciousness. Right? What object will you meditate upon? Patanjali gives different suggestions, but his best suggestion he gives is you should focus upon Ishvara. Because Samadhi Siddhi Ishwari Pranidhanat. The perfection of trance comes from surrender to Ishvara. So Ishvara, we can say, is God, if you like. It means, it comes from the Ish, the verbal root to be capable, who is omnipotent, the omnipotent supreme being. Okay, so that's Ishvara. Now some people think that, well, I'm Ishvara, we're all Ishvara, we're all God, like that. But that's not Patanjali's teaching. That's a superimposition. Very often people, they superimpose their own ideas onto his sutras. Because Patanjali, he defines who is Ishvara. He says, Klesha karma vipakashaya aparimrishta vishesh purush Ishvara. That Ishvara, or the supreme being, God, is a particular individual Purush, a conscious being, is Vishesh, means an individual, unique being, who was never touched by karma. So here the word touched is aparimrishta. He was never touched by karma. So the disciples of Patanjali, in their commentaries they said that our spiritual master has given this in the past tense to show that you and I, we are not God, and never in the future will we become God. Because God is that person who was never touched by karma in the past. And the very fact that we're doing yoga and trying to become liberated means that we're touched by karma now and we're trying to rise above that, become liberated from that. So it's very clear from the sutras of Patanjali that there's an eternal distinction between the individual souls, the individual atmas or purushas, and the supreme purush. So we can compare them to the sun and the photons emanating from the sun. The sun is qualitatively fiery and the photons are of the same quality as the sun. But the sun is vast and is the origin of all the photons. And the photons are tiny. The Ishvara has manifested all the souls, but we are souls. We can't make some more souls, right? Okay. And so the Yoga Sutras is it's not dualistic, but it embraces a spiritual variety. Beyond the duality of this world, there's a spiritual variety, a distinction between the individual souls and the supreme soul. So Patanjali said that Samadhi Siddhi Ishvara Pranidhanat, that the perfection of trance comes from surrendering of the individual soul to the supreme soul, and he suggests a method by which you can do that. And Patanjali recommends that one can utter the syllable Om, A-U-M, Om, because this sound vibration is non-different from God Himself. And that's the basic principle behind Kirtan, right? We're singing to say Hare Krishna Mahamantra or any mantra composed of the names of God. And the principle behind it is that that vibration is non-different from that being himself. And as we slowly come from the lower stages and become more and more concentrated, become ekagra, one-pointed on that vibration, then that sound vibration will reveal its divine qualities and personality, and that's called darshan, a vision of the Supreme Being. You see? So by understanding some of these principles, we can know the theory behind kirtan. It's not like a sing-along where we all get together and whatever, drink some cider.
Karaoke.
Yeah, it's not karaoke. It's a very, kirtan is the supreme, most powerful, most potential yoga practice that there is, actually. So Patanjali recommends the meditation on the vibration of the name of God. He uses the word Om. Now Om is a bij. It's a bij mantra. That means a seed mantra. So from a seed can grow a tree. And from a tree comes a fruit. So according to the Vedas, it said, Madaram Madaram Etan Mangalam Mangalanam Sakama Nigabhan Visatpalam Chitsurupam. The name of Krishna, the Maha Mantra, is like the fruit which grew on the tree of the Vedas. So in a seed, there's not much taste. In the trunk and the branches, there's not much taste. But all the flavor which is there but inaccessible becomes collected in the fruit. And so the name of Krishna, the Maha Mantra that we sing, is called the Rasatmik Roop of Om. Om is the seed, and when that seed manifests a juicy, tasty, delicious fruit, by which that can enliven us with different flavors of love, then that Om becomes Krishna, the vibration of Krishna. So these are some of the elements of the theory behind kirtan. What happens is, when a yogi directs his attention of his mind to an object, something wonderful happens in the state of ekagra. You develop a quality or a skill called samapati. Samapati, I'll just write that there. Samapati. Samapati means that your chitta transforms and becomes the very object that you're meditating on. I'll just make a little digression that's interesting. By understanding this, you can understand the mechanics of your own perception. Think about it. How do you perceive things? How do you see things? What happens is, there's a real world object which is made of these elements. So one of your senses, one or more of your senses, detects it. And then sends that signal all the way up into the chitta. Now the chitta is very responsive, and it makes a facsimile or an image of the thing that your sense touched. Just like if you put a cell phone in camera mode, if you pointed at something, what's in front is now reproduced on this screen. Right? You pointed at something, at a tree, and you see a tree right here. Because what happens, the light comes in, and then the pixels on the screen, they transform and they make a facsimile or an image of what's out there. Right? So, essentially, the chitta is like your screen. So when your eye sees something, the chitta transforms and makes a facsimile of what's out there. Right? And then your soul is transcendental, but looking into your chitta. And so you never actually see the world out there. All the perceptions that you have are a facsimile or a reproduction of the world in your own chitta. Right? That's what you're doing right now. Huh? You see? And that's why everyone sees things slightly different. Depending on how much sattva, rajas and tamas is in their chitta, they'll see things differently. Now someone may say, well, that sounds far-fetched, and they may have a doubt in it. Don't doubt it. And I'll give a little evidence to support it that is very convincing. And that is, let's say if a person has a very high fever, like malaria, or if they ingest some kind of psychotropic drug, then what happens? They look and they see everything's moving. You know, if you're having an hallucination due to fever or the effect of a drug, you see everything's moving. Now, everything out there isn't moving. But how is it that you're seeing everything's moving? Other people aren't seeing. It's not moving for them. It's just moving for you. But it looks like it's out there. But the fact is, you were never seeing it out there. Because your chitta has become disturbed. The prana is connected with the chitta. So the prana is disturbing the chitta either by disease or some type of drug. And so therefore, the mechanics of your perception is beginning to oscillate, causing everything to start to move like that. So hallucinations are proof of that this theory of perception is factual. And don't try that at home, kids. So now, what happens is, when you look at something, the shape comes. But when you look away, it disappears. Right? It's no longer there. And then you can try to bring it back. Memory is trying to bring back that image that was produced by the perception. And that's what memory is. But when we remember something, we lose a lot of detail. We lose a lot of detail. Sometimes psychologists do an experiment where they ask everyone, draw a $1 bill. And they draw it, and then they give them an actual real $1 bill and say, now draw it when you're looking at it, and you'll see how much was wrong. You kind of you remembered it, but there were so many details you couldn't remember. So what happens with in the stage of ekagra, that when you focus on an object, that object is actually perfectly appears in your mind. And the ability to perfectly reproduce the object is called samapati. And everyone develops that ability when they come to that stage of ekagra. Now, when that object appears in your mind, it's not just an image, it's the actual thing. And so in your meditation, you can examine it and know everything about its workings, outward and inwardly. Everything. How is it possible to do that? There are different ways of getting knowledge. One is to inspect something, to investigate something outwardly. But there's another type of knowledge which is called yogaja. Yogaja means the knowledge born from yoga. And so you can know all about something simply by going into the state of ekagra. And then your consciousness, your chitta reproduces it and you can examine it. So let's say, for example, in Ayurveda, in the Ayurvedic system, that's the Vedic medical system, so much knowledge of the body and herbs is there. But the sages who have developed the system, they didn't cut people open and look what's inside. This knowledge was yogaja. They focused their attention on the stomach, and then the chitta reproduced all the organs, and they began to examine them. They would focus on a herb, and the herb would be produced in the mind, and they would go in and discover all of the potencies of that herb and how it would relate then to the stomach, like this. So it's another way of learning. It's a different approach to science. It's also empirical in one sense, but it's not a gross empiricism. It's yogaja, the knowledge born of yoga. Now someone may say, well, that's pretty far out. Isn't that just imagination? And it's not imagination. Now remember that each element is the potential state of the later elements. Right? Each element contains the potential of the next element. Just as milk contains the potential of yogurt and butter and ghee. Right? So this chitta that you have, this chitta, your psychological body, is essentially the first element of the whole universe. So potentially, it has the power to recreate anything in the universe. Understand? This chitta can transform internally in your meditation to anything in the universe, and you can examine it and learn about it in the state of sampragyata samadhi. Right? Fascinating, huh? So this is why I was saying, if you learn this template, then all the different components of yoga will become very clear, and you'll see them, how scientific it is. Okay, now, what's the difference between these different levels of samadhi? The difference is this. It's a question of how subtle the object of your focus is. So in this first level, the vitarka level, savitarka and nirvitarka, the object is an object made of gross elements. For example, if you want to know about a cow, then you can sit in meditation, you can utter the word gau, which means cow in Sanskrit. And the chitta will transform, and the cow will, and you will understand everything about the body, the production of milk, and all the things, good things that cows do. No offense to those vegans here. So the Savitarka Samadhi has as its object a gross object, as we see them in the world. Whereas the Savichar and Nirvichar has as its object these subtle sense objects, these elements, not the gross elements themselves, air, water, fire, air, and ether, but the sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. In other words, the subtle foundation behind the gross elements. We tend to think, when we think of an object like a pot, we think, well, it's made of atoms, right? We think of it in that sense. But what are atoms made of? You see, there's always a more subtle foundational level behind it. So these sense objects are the subtle foundation behind the gross objects. So that is called the Savichar and Nirvichar. They focus on the subtle elements. Now, the difference between the Savitarka and Nirvitarka is the word Sa means with and Ni means without. So Tarka means the logical investigation. So when you begin to meditate an object, it appears, but at first it's a little bit fuzzy, and you're thinking, well, is it like this or is it like that? And then, when your concentration becomes more into focus, perfectly into focus, then that kind of speculation about how it is goes away, and it's clear. And so the only difference between these two is this is the kind of more fuzzy stage. It's appearing, but it's not fully focused. And then this is the fully focused stage. And then the next one, this is, of course, the object. The object of this is gross element. Gross element. And then the object of this samadhi is the subtle cause of the elements, the sense objects. So then, the next level of samadhi is that you focus your consciousness not on the things that you can perceive, but on the mechanics of perception itself. In other words, you're moving away from the tamasic transformations of ego, to the actual mechanics of the senses themselves. You're going towards the rajasic transformation of ego here. So it's very interesting. In Vedanta, our senses are actually very subtle atoms. They're 5 atoms, and they're situated around the soul in the heart chakra. There's an atom of sight, form, taste, smell. They're 5 like this. And they have within them some rajas. So rajas is a kriya shakti, it's a power of action. Now what happens is, air is a gross element. For the yogis, this point is important. Air is a gross element, and it's dead. It cannot move, it cannot do anything. But when the air is electrified by the kriya shakti, the active potency in that sense atom, it starts to move. And that's called pran. Okay? That's called pran. If you ever wondered, well, what really is pran? Pran is the air element which is inert, it doesn't move, but it's moving now because it's become electrified or animated by the kriya shakti, the potency of passion of action, which is present in the atoms of the senses. And so then what happens is that pran, carrying that shakti, starts to move around the body through the nadi system. Right? So you have the Sushumna Nadi, you have the 7 main chakras, and then you have actually 72,000 nadis that travel all over the body, and that's the basis of essentially your nervous system. And so the soul is a minute particle of spirit floating in the heart, surrounded by the atoms of the senses. And then these atoms of the senses send their energy out through the prana, which pervades the whole body and gives you the impression that you're this big lumbering machine. Right?
So cool.
Huh? That's how it works. Is that interesting? Are you learning something today?
Yay! This is fabulous. Fascinating.
I know I'm cramming it a little bit, it's a little bit fast, but then take a photo of this and listen to the recording afterwards. Just go over it a few times so you really get it, you know. And to be in clear consciousness means to be aware of this, how it's all working. That's clear consciousness, to be aware of how this is going on. And if we're not aware of how this is going on, we're basically like a beast of burden, you know, just standing in the field chewing the cud. Really, right? What's the difference? What's the difference? If we just identify with the body, we're not really aware of the components of reality. So, I love this stuff, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, in Sananda, you're not focused on the things of the world, but you're looking at the actual mechanics of how you experience the things. And in that stage, the whole illusion of life comes crashing down. It comes crashing down. You see? Now your consciousness is so sattvic that the illusions are just dropped. For example, let's say if there's a yogi and sees a very beautiful woman walking by, right? A Victoria's Secret model, right? She's walking past. What does he see? He sees basically a kind of carbon-based organism there, a skeleton, you know, the bones, maybe made of calcium, and it's stuffed with some urine and some mucus and some blood and some fat, right? It's all wrapped with some hair and fingernails like that, and that's kind of like, and the gunas, the 3 gunas are moving it, and this kind of like mechanical puppet thing is just, you know. Yeah. And there's a soul floating on the prana in that machine, thinking, oh, I'm a beautiful woman, like this is completely an illusion. So the yogi is looking and seeing what's really there, because his mind is sattvic, so the illusions have dropped. Right? But then if there's a young man who's rajasic, he's thinking, wow, and maybe she'll give me her phone number or something, you know, and he'll approach. He sees there a potential for a relationship or some enjoyment or whatever, just a hookup or something, you know. So because he's identifying with his body, he's identifying with that body, and he becomes overwhelmed with desires. His chitta is fluctuating, all these attachments are coming, completely an illusion. And then so he's in rajas. Now let's take someone in tamas, completely in tamas, like perhaps a wolf. So the wolf sees her coming and thinks, dinner. So depending on which guna is in our mind, we're going to see everything in a different way. So what we're trying to do tonight is really, you know, we have to be moving up there, at least into sattva, so all the illusions can drop and we can see what's really, and when we see what's really there, it's like, and the attraction for it goes away, so we can turn our attraction towards the spiritual life, the attainment of our eternal loving relationship with the Supreme Being. You see? Okay, so in the stage of Sananda, you see how your senses are cheating you, and then you become full of bliss. People think that happiness is in finding something to enjoy. No, because you're trying to find something to enjoy, that's why you're not happy. Actually, when you become self-situated, you become self-satisfied, you become free from all hankering, you automatically become Sananda, means with joy. Sa-ananda, with joy. Right? And it's a sattvic, it's a very high, but it's a sattvic joy. It's not yet transcendental, but it's a pretty high level enjoyment compared to anything else that common people consider to be a source of happiness in this world. And then the last stage is that you move the focus even further away from the senses, and you just come to the chitta. You even go beyond the hankar, and you come to the chitta, and you see the chitta, the foundation of all your worldly experiences, and there just remains this sense of subject and object. I am the spiritual subject, and I am seeing this. I've come to the finest element. Now, okay. Now some yogic fun begins. What happens is, if you focus on some of these levels, these earlier levels of samadhi, and you produce that object, your consciousness produces it, you imbibe the qualities of that object. So, for example, if in the state of nirvitarka samadhi, the object of your laser-like focus is the element of air, then your consciousness transforms, becomes identical with the air element, and you imbibe that, and it flows through you, and you begin to float into the air and levitate. So that's how the siddhi of levitation comes about. You see? Now you could turn your focus onto your chitta and look at the impressions which are there of past lives. So you can look inside and then discover one by one who you were in your previous life, the life before that, and so on. So all the different siddhis, the mystic powers, are simply byproducts that come in the stage of nirvitarka and nirvichar samadhi, depending on which is the object of your focus. Right? So that's the principle behind the yoga siddhis. Now, so again, the yoga siddhis, you can't understand them without this key, knowing that the chitta is everything is a product of the chitta. The chitta can transform to become an object through samapati in this stage of ekagra, and then by fully identifying with that, you take on those qualities, and therefore you get the mystic power, the yoga siddhi. Now, how does this relate to bhakti yoga? Patanjali does say that the perfection of trance comes from surrender or focusing the mind upon God in the form of a mantra, the name of God. Om is a name of God. He directly addresses the Ishvara. Now, the implication is this. We know that yoga means to restrain the oscillations of the mind that bring about all the various illusions of life. But the question is, what is it that causes these oscillations of mind in the first place? Now, Patanjali doesn't really address that, but he addresses it obliquely. You can reverse engineer the answer to that from his sutras. If the perfection of trance comes from focusing the mind on Ishvara, God, then it means conversely, the fluctuations of the mind arise from the attention being turned away from God. Right? Therefore, the conclusion is, the soul's experience of samsara, or the endless chain of birth and death, the soul's experience of material existence is simply caused by our indifference to God. That's all it is. And therefore the answer to everything, the opposite of indifference is devotion. Right? They're the antithesis. You're indifferent to something or you're devoted to it. And that's why bhakti yoga is the most direct and powerful route to trance and God realization. Because it strikes right at the root. And what happens is, if you do bhakti yoga, you go directly into trance on the Supreme Being and perfection without necessarily going through these stages, which produce these byproducts of mystic powers, which are big temptations actually. You're subjecting yourself to going through all these temptations. Whereas in bhakti yoga, even though you do go through the stages, but it doesn't produce the distractions of the siddhis. And when you become perfect in Bhakti Yoga, you get all the siddhis for free as like a free gift. And that's why Bhakti Yoga is so powerful and direct means. Now, I want to, just as a final philosophical point before we have the dessert, look at how far are we from realization of Krishna. Krishna means God inside. Krishna means bliss. Krishna means existence. Krishna means existence and attractiveness. And na means bliss. So that person who is the embodiment of attraction, beauty, and joy in Sanskrit is addressed by the name Krishna. It's a beautiful word, Krishna. It's very interesting. In the Oxford English Dictionary, there's a word, and the definition is impelling beauty that inspires devotion. Okay, this is like a crossword puzzle, right? Okay, the definition: impelling beauty that inspires devotion. What is that word in English? English word. Impelling beauty that something so beautiful when you see it, just be full head over heels in love and devoted. What is that word in English? Countdown. Okay. The answer is charisma. Charisma. And because Sanskrit is the root of, it's the same in English, Italian, French, German, Russian, Greek. It's the same in every land, charisma. And it comes from Krishna. Charisma. Beauty, that impelling beauty that just catches you and you just become devoted.
Wow.
Nice?
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare charisma.
Yeah. My hair's just standing. Just thinking about it. Krishna. Okay. So, now, we want to see how these correlate to the stages of bhakti. So, the commentators on the Yoga Sutras have pointed out that if you come to this stage of ekagra, and you come into this first stage, nirvitarka, and you utter the name of God, Om, or Krishna, then you will see reflected in your steady chitta the form of God. You will see. So this beautiful indigo child. Have you heard of indigo children?
Yeah.
Right, indigo children.
Yeah.
I went to a school, I did a seminar with a teacher of indigo children, and they teach them how to read with their eyes closed and stuff like that,
Wow.
So there is, so Krishna's the original indigo child. He's actually indigo, right? He's blue. Yeah. And he's very, very beautiful, very loving. So it's not an imagination, it's not a mythology. It's just absolutely not a mythology. When you come to that stage of focus, it's just this first stage. Then, when you utter the mantra, Krishna, then the beautiful form of that indigo child playing the flute with a peacock feather in his hair just manifests in your consciousness. So, then when you come to the stage of nirvichar, you go into a deeper trance, then the qualities of Krishna begin to appear. His qualities. At first, it's just like, if you go into a temple and you see a statue of the deity in the temple, that's called a vigraha. So the vibration of the mantra is called Shabda Archa. Shabda Archa Vigraha. In other words, just like you see the deity in the temple, when you go into trance, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Then just the form of Krishna appears in your consciousness, but without his qualities. And as you go deeper, then the qualities appear. What do we mean here? We mean his fragrance, which is like a combination of the fragrance of a blue lotus flower mixed with camphor and musk and sandalwood paste. Can you imagine that? It's like that, but more beautiful. So his fragrance appears, his softness. It's said that the divine spiritual form of Krishna is so soft that if a leaf will fall from a tree and land on him, when you remove that leaf, there's an impression on his skin.
So the softness of the beautiful, it's not a material form. The spiritual form of Krishna appears. And then as you go further, then the light emanating from his body begins to reveal his spiritual world and his divine associates, the angelic beings who eternally serve him. You see? And then when you do samapati on those beings who have already attained the divine realm, then your consciousness transforms by samatapati and becomes just like them. And then you place your abhiman, your identity, into that spiritual form. And you do that daily in your meditation. And when the last moment of your life comes, you transfer your consciousness into that spiritual form. Your body falls away. And everyone starts crying and does your funeral. But you go dancing into the spiritual world in an eternal loving relationship with Krishna. Right? So this is the process of bhakti yoga. It's not a mythology. It's not an imagination. It's a very real science of how you can graduate from the university of this world, become free from the reincarnation, attain a very beautiful spiritual form, and enter into a perfect loving relation with the Supreme Being in a state of praying, pure love. That's why you were born. We're all born for that. That's the purpose of our life. But somewhere along the way, we bought cable TV or something. And just got distracted by other things. But there are many forms of life, the animal forms and so on. But when we have this human form of life, it's really a gift of God. The human form of life is like a ship, a boat that can help us cross over the ocean of material existence. And Guru, the spiritual teacher, is like a captain of that ship. He gives us direction, go in this direction, hoist the sail. Your daily practice is like putting up the sail. So your practice won't take you anywhere. Just like a sail can't take you anywhere. But when you put up the sail, that's like putting up the sail. And then the grace of our spiritual teacher and the grace of Krishna fills our sadhana with life. And we cross over the material ocean to the spiritual world. So that's the conclusion of our philosophical analysis for today. Do we have a few minutes to have a little dessert?
Yeah.
Not a kirtan, just a little history of a person who's been through this.
Yeah.
Okay. In India, just a few hundred years ago, there was a tycoon, a businessman, very successful. His name was Lala Babu. Babu means like tycoon, right? Lala Babu. And actually in his business, he had a rival. His name was Jagannath Seth. And their rivalry was very intense. It was like Apple and IBM. Like, it was like iPhone and Android or whatever. Like that, it was an intense business competition. And it was ruthless. They were sworn enemies of each other. But gradually the years went by, and Lala Babu, one evening, he was taking a walk on the bank of the Ganges River in Bengal. And there was a boatman there, and evening was coming, the sun was about to set. And the boatman was eager to go home and be with his family. So he called out, he said, "The sun is setting. If you want to cross over, this is your last chance." Because it was the last time that he would take anyone across the river. So Lala Babu was walking and he was in a philosophical mood. And when he heard this voice, "The sun is setting. If you want to cross over, this is your last chance." It was as if God himself was speaking to him. He took it to mean, now the sun is setting on my life. I've come to the autumn of my life, the later years of my life. If I don't make an effort to develop my spiritual consciousness, I have to take birth again. This is my last chance to cross over this material world and attain my spiritual destination.
So when he heard that, he was really struck by that. And he thought, okay, this is it. I can't do this business and all this stuff anymore. And he decided to renounce his home and leave and go to Vrindavan. So Vrindavan's in the north of India. It's a very famous holy place. And when Krishna plays his pastimes in this hall, that's where he does his pastimes. That's where I live. My ashram is there on the bank of Jamuna in Vrindavan. And you're all welcome to come.
Yeah.
And my home it's not mine, it's Krishna's home and it's your home too. You're all welcome to come. So he left everything and he came to Vrindavan. And when in the Vedic culture, when you renounce, you leave behind your wealth and everything. It's over. Like you become dead to the world. And he came to Vrindavan and he was looking there to try to find a guru, a spiritual teacher, who could give him a mantra, a powerful mantra, and guide him in spiritual life. So he was traveling here and there in Vrindavan, and he met one old saint with whom he was very impressed, and who was very affectionate towards him. And he asked, please, can I become your disciple? So the spiritual master, he tested him for some time, and then he gave him initiation. So he gave him a mala, it's called a japa mala, with 108 beads. And he told him to take bath in the river. He gave him a tilak. It's a part of the initiation process. And he whispered the Maha Mantra in his right ear. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare.
He said, without any pride, without any ego at all, without making any plan for the future, for tomorrow or the next day, I want you to live your life completely dependent upon the grace of God. You should live by begging. And I want you to systematically, each day, you should wake up early in the morning, take bath, become refreshed, put on your tilak, take your japamala, become absorbed in the mantra of the names of Krishna. And then after chanting for 5-6 hours or so, then you should go out and knock on a few doors and ask, Bhavan Bhiksham Dehi, oh kind sir, kindly give me alms. And whatever they give you, whatever, a chapati, a little bread or some rice or some fruit, just take that as the grace of God, offer it to Krishna, take prasadam and live in this simple way. Just meditation. And begging is, when the spiritual master tells the disciple to live by begging, it's to reduce the ego. Because it's very humiliating. If you're a tycoon one day, right? And now you become a beggar. And so that helps reduce this ahankar, so you can get to the chitta and to the soul. Okay? So he told him, and you should go gradually to every house in Vrindavan and chant, practice every day. So he did this for some time, and some years went by, and he was chanting, but the internal realization wasn't coming. He was becoming focused, but the form of the beauty of Krishna, the mantra was not revealing itself to him. So he went back to his guru, and he said, Gurudev, I am trying to follow your instructions, but there seems to be some obstacle. And I'm not having a breakthrough, and realization is not coming to me. What should I do? His guru said, you are not following my instruction. He thought, well, I thought I was following the instruction, but my teacher told me I'm not. So there must be something I'm doing wrong. And then he realized, oh, I wasn't fully following the instruction. Why? After some time, his old enemy, his old business rival, also became inspired to leave his home in Bengal, and he made a little house in Vrindavan. And so Lala Babu every day would go and beg, and he went to each house, but he never went to that house. I'm not going to that house. It's that guy, Jagannath said, Yeah? In my life, I never gave him a dollar. He never gave me a dollar. You know, it's like, I'm not going to that house. What does it? It means that though he was remembering the mantra, he was chanting, he was following the instruction of his guru, but he was consciously holding on to the ahankar, the ego. It's a very interesting thing, that if you have a hostility towards someone, you don't like someone, you have a hostility towards them, that's actually the grip of a past karma, actually. It's not a fault in them, it's a fault in us. Because we have hostility, we have some enmity, some envy towards that person for whatever reason, and that means we're under the grip of a past karma. We haven't become free from it yet. You see? So then he realized, oh, I'm going to have to swallow my pride. So then he set off, he chanted in the morning, still no realization was coming, and he set off, and he was going towards that house. So he came and he knocked on the door. Bhavan Bhiksham Dehi. So then that Jagannath said he was living there, and you know, householders in India, they know if a beggar, a saint, a spiritualist comes to my door, actually that's good for me. He's not really begging and I'm not really giving anything. That person is giving me an opportunity to make advancement in spiritual life by giving up my sense of ownership over things. Because we don't really own anything. All the elements are in this world were here before we were born, and they'll still be here when we go. And in the middle we grasp at them and call them mine. But you'll see, when you have to leave, you can't take anything with you. You come into the world empty-handed and leave empty-handed. So this sense of possessiveness is illusory. It's one of the functions of ego. And so when a saint or a beggar comes to, it's not that he's really begging, or he needs anything, or you're giving anything, but you're being benefited on your spiritual path by relinquishing the sense of ownership over things. And because you become instrumental in helping a spiritualist, you also get a spiritual piety as well from that. So he knew, oh, well, there's a sadhu, there's a saint, there's a beggar at my door. This is my good fortune, I should give something. So he collected a tray and he put some money and some fruit and things on it, and he went to the door and he opened the door. And there was his arch enemy, standing there, holding out his cloth, Bhiksham Dehi. And they looked in each other's eyes. And the moment they looked in each other's eyes, the masks came off. What is the mask? All of this. The hankar, the manas, the buddhi, the senses, and all the experiences and impressions that we've collected through them. None of that is us, and none of that is the other person. So those masks came off, and when they looked into each other's eyes, one soul saw another soul. One servant of God saw another servant of God. And tears came in their eyes, and they embraced each other. And very happily he gave him some alms, and then he went in the house. And he took the alms, and he went back to his little ashram. And they both sat down to chant. They both took their malas, and they began to chant their mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And because they'd given up their pride, bodily identification, when they chanted the mantra, then the beautiful form of Krishna appeared on the lotus of their heart. Their hair stood on end, tears of love flowed from their eyes, and they both became siddha, perfect in pure bhakti, transcendental devotion to Krishna. So we can all experience that. If we want to tread this path of bhakti, we can pray to Krishna, help me find a qualified teacher, qualified guru. Receive a powerful mantra. You see, because a mantra isn't this shabda, it's not this sound, which the regular sound that people speak is just a transformation of ego. A mantra is called Shabda Brahma. It's a spiritual sound. It's not produced by the tongue. It comes from the heart of the Guru. And the Guru gives you that spiritual sound. It's actually the sound
form of Krishna, of God Himself. And He puts Krishna into your heart through the mantra. And then you practice daily after some time, when the ego, the eclipse of the ego has passed, then the beautiful form of Krishna appears in the heart and our life is perfect. So that opportunity is there for all of us. That's really the meaning of our life. So then what happened to Lala Babu? He was an old man, living like a beggar. Someone would think, what happened to him? He's crazy, you know. He had a life of luxury there. Now he's living like a beggar and he's there in Vrindavan wandering. And one day some travelers, they were riding on horseback and they came to an inn. They went inside, they tied their horses outside. So the horses had been running, they were sweating, they were very frisky. This old man, Lala Baba, was walking with his stick through the small lanes of Vrindavan. And as he walked behind the horse, a frisky horse kicked his leg, kicked him in the chest. And he fell down, boom, like that. Dead. Dead. That was it. Old man lying dead and penniless in the street. Don't think so. You know? Because when the love for Krishna becomes intense, then Krishna feels, the Supreme Lord Krishna, He cannot live without you. So what happened? Krishna called, hey, come here. And He called his soul, and in his beautiful spiritual form He came, and he's now dancing and playing with Krishna in the spiritual, but with a horse. So bhakti is very confidential, very mysterious. The general persons, they cannot guess, they cannot understand the internal, wonderful, loving experience which is taking place in the heart of the purified saints. Jai Jai Sri Ram. So my beloved brothers and sisters, I want to invite you to, every year we do a tour of Vrindavan for 1 month, in the month of Kartik. So the month of Kartik, astrologically this year it falls on the 5th of October to the 4th of November. So you're most welcome to come and join us on that tour. We'll do another tour in the springtime, in Navadvipa and Puri and Vrindavan, in the springtime. But if you like to leave your emails with Jai, everyone knows Jayashree? Okay? Leave your emails with her and I'll send you the details of our tours there. So the tour is visiting the important holy places, learning about the music and the poetry and the history of the saints in those places. So it's a very cultural and educational tour. It's a spiritual holiday, a spiritual adventure. And really, it's not just a journey to India, but it's a journey of your soul. And I guarantee that at the end of it, you will not be the same person. You will not return to Boston, the person who left Boston. It's very pilgrimage. In Sanskrit it's called parikrama. It's a very transformative experience. So we extend that invitation. Give me a chance to serve you in those holy places. Yes.
Could you just say one thing, just because it might be interesting, is, you mentioned the word samskaras and impressions. And just because you've been speaking so much about yoga, to say a little bit how those impressions transform our consciousness by going parikrama. Could you say a little something? Is that too much?
Oh. I'll explain that in the next class.
Yes. I just want to announce that Prabhu is here. We're so lucky, right? How amazing this is. And this is this weekend is our come here. This weekend is our 10-month anniversary of Sanctuary. And 10 months ago, Chudani Maharaj was here in November.